Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Hinkle. I chair the commission. To the members of the public who are attending, thank you very much for your attendance. Let me begin today by a roll call, please, after having called the meeting to order, which I've just done. Commissioner Bluestone,
I'm present. Good morning.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes, good morning here.
Commissioner Crispin,
Good morning, I am here.
Commissioner Hall,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Luma,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Talley,
Morning, present.
and Commissioner Baker is not present today. We do have a quorum. And with that, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes of our June 26th meeting. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve the minutes.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes,
Commissioner Crispin,
I was only here for part of the meeting, so I will not vote.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner Talley,
Yes.
and I also approve them. And with that, I turn to our executive director for his report, please. Enrique?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, commissioners. I'll just need 1 minute to share my screen and provide you with our report. Can everybody see the screen? Okay, so as part of my report, I will give you an overview of some of the activities in the last month and other recent and upcoming milestones. As a reminder to those in attendance, the Commission does not take public comment at these meetings, but instead we ask members of the public to reach us by using any of the resources on the screen. We, and let me emphasize, accept and very much appreciate written comment at any time. When we receive comments, we share those comments with the appropriate individual, including, of course, commissioners, when some of those communications are addressed to them and or to the agency, or of course to me. Last month, we received a few comments regarding the presentations from Dr. Tracy Goodness and the remarks and presentation from Commissioner Bluestone. Those comments were forwarded to commissioners and the staff working on these topics. The comments received were complementary of posts addressing the topic of officer behavioral health, recognizing the importance of this issue. I want to highlight a letter that we received from Dennis Galvin, who is a retired major of the state police and the current president of the Massachusetts Association for Professional Law Enforcement, also known as MAPLE. Mr. Galvin notes the importance of behavioral health and the impacts to the community and law enforcement when issues around it are unaddressed. I will mention one of his points that I found interesting, and it is that standards on the topic of behavioral health should also be set for those supervisors in charge of officers exposed to stress. Mr. Galvin compliments posts for addressing this topic, and his letter has been included in the packet. Again, public comment is very much encouraged, especially when it's done in writing. And going forward, I will summarize those comments as part of my report, or the person presenting the topic will also summarize those comments that we receive. So moving on, I will update the Commission on the preliminary totals for the certification applications submitted after the June 30th deadline. I will then provide the finance update, including our forecast for the end of fiscal year 25 and a lower than expected final number for our budget and appropriation for fiscal year 26. I will give you a recap of the evolution of that figure and some of the plans we have to adjust to those funding reductions. I will close with that administrative update and our current organizational chart and plans going forward. So like prior years, the certification team, with the support of the technology team and the very important collaboration of the departments, worked in the last few weeks to complete the certification of approximately 7,600 officers. The preliminary numbers are represented in these, and these are preliminary final numbers. They're represented in this chart. You can see that approximately 99% of the applications have been successfully submitted and processed with the breakdown that appears right below. Most individuals are certified or have been certified. The notifications are being sent, as we speak. And approximately, and that is 6,764. There are 379 individuals conditionally certified. The figures around school resource officers, both certified and conditionally certified, are consistent to what we've seen in the past, but they also, of course, only include those officers whose certification expired, and those are last names A through H. Only in a few cases that require further review, and there are only a handful of people not certified at this point. There is one agency pending submission. They've asked for and obtained an extension like our regulations provide for, and that is Wareham Police Department. But the 5 individuals that appear as not certified in my prior slide are cases in which there may have been an administrative suspension for lack of completion of in-service training. And as I have reported in the past, we are moving now to categorize those individuals as not certified because, well, they have not completed that in-service training, which may include more than 1 year. I will also note that as part of this first recertification cycle, we asked agencies to confirm whether non-minor disciplinary records had not been submitted to post, like you all have heard multiple times in the past, me reporting about those records. There are a handful of agencies that have been submitting those as part of this process, and that represents approximately 75 individuals. Finally, and as I have reported to you in last month, we count approximately 849 individuals with last names A through H whose certification expired. No agency submitted their information and they remain unassociated. We will start denoting them as expired in our records. Similarly, there are 609 individuals who are also unassociated officers whose certification has been marked as restricted until further notice. The breakdown of these figures I will give you in the next 2 slides. So as I mentioned last month, we are reporting expired certifications of those individuals who are unassociated from any agency and their certification has well expired. The intention is to continue reporting those expired certifications publicly for a period of 90 days. We will also take steps to notify those individuals by electronic mail, where we have a personal or alternative email address on file. Of course, because they are unassociated, their department email address is unavailable. We have also recently notified agencies of the new category, and they are also instructed to contact Post if and when they are considering hiring an officer whose certification has expired or is restricted. The reason to do that is to confirm such assignment, update our records, and ensure that all information is in order, including whether there may be a disciplinary matter that is pending, has been concluded, or anything else that the prospective hiring agency may be unaware of. That's the whole point in these 2 new classifications. So similarly, we have 609 individuals whose certification has been restricted, and we will be reporting that accordingly. The breakdown of that category is in this slide. You can see that 296 individuals simply retired prior to that expiration, 237 resigned, and a few others have done so because they may be facing or they were about to face some disciplinary proceeding, either resign or retired in lieu of discipline. These last two categories, along, of course, with the terminations, we watch closely. It is fair to say that among some, but certainly not all of those individuals, there may have the potential for a case before the Division of Standards. Again, the same can be said for officers whose certification expired from the previous slide and either resigned or retired in lieu of discipline or were terminated. We will continue to list those with a restricted certification really indefinitely until there's a change of that status in some other way, which could include just an expiration of that certification, like I explained in the previous slide. I will move on to provide you with a finance and administrative update for fiscal year 25. We have revised spending estimate of $8.07 million. We're still finalizing the exact amount of reversions. We have some costs that were incurred in the prior fiscal year. They have not been disbursed, and that is happening as we speak. Our agency headcount, the reversions are therefore estimated to be between $620,000 and $674,000. Our agency headcount remains as 51 employees, and we currently have 3 positions open, as denoted in this slide. Those are a record access officer, a business analyst, and a data analytics manager. One of them is replacing somebody who left us recently. Lastly, the finance team and the internal control working group, of which I am, of course, a part of, recently published an updated internal control plan, which is a best practice and in meeting with the controller's guidance. Now, this chart represents the progress and evolution of our budget requests for fiscal year 26 at the various stages of the budget development process. The process started with posts requests to the Secretary of Administration and Finance. That request was $9,490,000. At the time, that would have represented an increase of 8% from the prior year, and in other words, this fiscal year 25 that just ended, or an additional $746,000. As we have in mind, of course, important new initiatives and new hires. In January of this year, the House 1 budget was unveiled, which funded posts at $8,920,000. In other words, a reduction of $530,000 from the requested budget. But still a modest increase, or in other words, about $172,000 from the prior budget of $8,747,000. So the amount of $8,920,000 was in both the House Ways and Means budget and the Senate Ways and Means budget. They come out one after the other. The Senate comes out after the House comes out. Those dates are between April and May of this year. So when we saw those two figures, we assumed, of course, that would be our final budget, because once the two budgets, because that budget was technically not in conference, not part of the conference committee, when the numbers are the same. However, something unusual happened, and that is that the post-budget emerged out of conference with an even lower number. In other words, a $90,000 reduction, as is represented in this chart. This is unusual. I have not seen this happen in the past. In other words, that changes to budgets that were not in conference, emerge with a reduction. This is quite rare. We did not notice, however, that similar reductions were applied to other agencies and independent agencies that were not in conference. This tells us that the administration and the legislature are quite likely contemplating difficult budgetary times ahead, perhaps in anticipation of funding cuts from the federal government, particularly around Medicaid, which has been reported quite publicly quite a bit. I should note that Post does not get funded through any federal monies, but again, we interpret this unusual reduction to be related to the funding uncertainty given the environment ahead. So there is a bit of a silver lining in the funding story for Post, given the current and past appropriations. It is that given the way the budget is put together and the fact that we are still in growth mode with some additional hires in the pipeline, as I just reported to you, we have had reversions in the past by virtue of budgeting for the new positions for the full fiscal year while hiring those positions throughout the year. This is in line with the controller's guidance and A&F expectations. They want to make sure that any FTE that is hired throughout the year is counted as the baseline for the current or for the current and the next fiscal year when we do the following year's budgeting. So we have reported the effects of those reversions in the past. And the case for this fiscal year is that we anticipate, as I just mentioned a couple of slides ago, $625,000 in reversions for the fiscal year 25. So given that we will continue with those planned hires or some of those planned hires in the next fiscal year, our expectation is that those reversions will be significantly less this coming year compared to prior years. In essence, we continue with our modest growth, perhaps not as big as we anticipated or requested at the beginning of at the end of last year, but we will start addressing important new initiatives, mostly around auditing of agencies, as we have some planned hires around this area. Let me just give you a brief outlook of the 2026 budget and some of the assumptions that have also been reported in the past. Although our payroll costs are the largest percentage of our budget, at approximately 73% of the total budget, there are other factors that come into play when planning for this fiscal year 26 that will enable us to, again, begin the process of auditing agencies, which is an incremental cost compared to last year. We will continue to manage a few of those employees that are part-time, those retirees whose hours are limited to 1,200 hours per year. We will fine-tune our estimates for the salaries of open positions and, as I mentioned in the previous slide, calculate the budget capacity available to annualizing the salaries for the year. We have done some prepayment of certain information technology spending. We anticipate fewer consultant or outside counsel hours than previously budgeted, and will manage certain hires until late in the fiscal year. Although at this point, I don't think it is entirely necessary, we might limit fellowships and internships that come at the end of the fiscal year as we continue this, as we embark on this year's budget. I just want to show a couple of slides for the effect of and the evolution of those reversions. In other words, the unspent monies that are returned to the state to the Commonwealth at the end of the fiscal year. Since the inception of Post, our reversions have gotten smaller over time. And as we continue to mature as an agency, we were incrementally closing the gap between budgeted and actual expenses because of the effects that I just explained a little while ago. So the estimated reversions for fiscal year 25 stand at $674,000, maybe between $620 and $674. And to better demonstrate how we can manage through our $8 million and $830 million $8,830,000 appropriation, we took the average reversions from fiscal year 24 and 25, which is 758,000, and compared it to our initial requested figure of 9,480,000. And you can see that the estimate projected to be about 8,740,000, which is less than our final appropriation. So to elaborate even further, let's now take that fiscal year 26 projected spending figure of 8,740,000 and compare it to our appropriation. And you can see that we may expect a less than 100,000 reversion at the next fiscal year if we continue with that trend. This completely coincides with our historical trend analysis of reversions, and put another way, the gap shrinks as we approach maturity, and in this particular case, it enables us to grow in the form that we had planned, although not necessarily at the same speed, in the form of 6 additional hires for the coming fiscal year. So the organizational chart was included in the packet. That's the current one. It denotes the growth that I just mentioned, and it includes that includes 2 positions that are slated for the audit function that I've reported previously, and 4 additional positions for the Division of Standards to continue addressing the growing number of cases and that we bring to the Commission for discipline or training. I will also mention that we are contemplating making some changes to that organizational chart as we change perhaps different reporting structures or job functions and titles to accommodate the audit function. At the time we initially presented the budget to ANF, we estimated we could utilize a mix of in-house resources and consultants for that pilot audit program that I keep referencing. But given what I just explained, we are now thinking we will tackle a pilot program with in-house resources. Again, this would necessitate some additional hires and some reorganization and redefinition of functions. I am by no means contemplating letting go anyone. We are simply looking at redefining some roles and reporting to address some of these emerging priorities of the Commission. Finally, our diversity memo has also been included in the packet, which shows almost no changes since it was last presented, which was 6 months ago. The org chart has been included in the packet and again shows the current status, including those additional hires that I mentioned. But we will come back to the Commission with some updates in the near future to reflect what I am talking about. Excuse me, and update you on those changes. I think that that is the end of my presentation, and let me take any questions from commissioners, questions or comments if they have.
I don't think I see any hands in the air. I suspect my fellow commissioners agree with me that we are incredibly impressed with the material that you just presented to us. We are grateful to the staff who have worked on the matters that you've explained to us, and I think we recognize the extraordinary accomplishments that Post has had in the years that we've been in existence through the material that you've been providing. So I think with that, unless there are any questions, let me turn to the next matter on our agenda, which is the legal update. And I turn to our General Counsel, Randy Ravitz, at this point.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The first item in the legal update is a continued discussion of officer recertification. To put the discussion in context for members of the public, the Commission is required to evaluate each law enforcement officer every 3 years to determine if the officer continues to satisfy a set of requirements and can therefore be recertified. Now, certain of those requirements are listed in the Commission's governing statute, Chapter 6E of the General Laws, but the Commission can add to those requirements and develop procedures regarding the recertification process. A few years ago, the Commission adopted a set of recertification regulations found at 555 CMR 7 that was largely designed to accommodate the newness of the certification system and was adopted with the understanding that those regulations would be revised over time. Accordingly, the Commission established a certification policy subcommittee to consider revisions to the process. It was chaired by Commissioner Calderoni and also included Commissioners Bluestone and Kazarogian. That subcommittee held a series of meetings in accordance with the open meeting law. It received public comments from various individuals and groups, verbally and in writing, and it approved a draft set of regulations for the Commission's consideration, while identifying certain areas that should be explored and examined in greater depth. So in public meetings of the full Commission that followed, the Commission was presented with that revised draft set of regulations on recertification. And those areas that warrant more examination were presented individually. The first few areas concerned character and fitness, and the Commission discussed and offered its views on those. The next ones concerned the statutory requirement of, quote, successful completion of a physical and psychological fitness evaluation approved by the Commission, unquote. However, with respect to the psychological fitness component, our agency, like others, has preferred and found it more fitting to speak in terms of behavioral health. So in recent meetings, there have been a series of presentations regarding officer physical fitness and officer behavioral health. And in a moment, I will turn the floor over to my colleague, Attorney Annie Lee, for a continuation of the discussion of physical fitness and various ways in which the statutory requirement can be implemented. And we are hoping to hear the Commission's preferences regarding that subject so that we can then incorporate those into the revised recertification regulations and return with a complete plan for the Commission to consider and vote on. Of course, any set of regulations approved by the Commission would be subject to a public notice and comment process, which would give members of the public additional opportunities to submit verbal and written comments, and those comments would be given due consideration, and based on past experience would likely result in proposed revisions to the regulations for the Commission's consideration. And the regulations would not become effective unless and until the Commission votes to approve a final version following that notice and comment process. So as I said, I will now turn the matter over to Attorney Lee to discuss the area of physical fitness.
Thank you, Randy, and good morning, Madam Chairs and Commissioners. So last month, I presented a chart that describes the various options the Commission may consider when determining how to set ongoing physical fitness standards and evaluations for officers seeking recertification. That chart is in your packet starting at page 50. And so to quickly summarize, that chart describes three informational initiatives for the Commission's consideration, including 1, wearable health trackers, 2, nutrition education, and 3, wellness education. The chart next describes 7 incentive and resource initiatives, including on-site fitness opportunities, off-site fitness opportunities, fitness instructor training opportunities, fitness competitions, incentives, on-site healthy food options, and health and fitness focused personnel. And lastly, it describes 6 examination and evaluation initiatives, including medical exams and evaluations, medical clearance reports, physical fitness tests, functional capacity evaluations, physical ability tests, as well as body composition standards. And so these initiatives describe a range of ways to not only evaluate officers' physical fitness as called for by statute, but also ways to support officers' physical fitness, sometimes leading up to those evaluations. And so as Randy mentioned, the next step here is to, at a future meeting, will be to consider amendments to the Commission's recertification regulations on this specific topic. And so in the interest of making sure that any proposed amendments most accurately reflect the Commission's views on physical fitness, it would be helpful for the Commission to provide feedback not only as to which initiatives it thinks are beneficial for setting physical fitness standards and evaluations, but also which initiatives it thinks would be detrimental to that effort. And so, for example, in the chart, you'll see that we've categorized initiatives based on feasibility. But just because an initiative we anticipate will be most feasible, as in easiest to implement, doesn't mean that those are necessarily the right physical standards and evaluations for officers. And conversely, just because we anticipate an initiative might be relatively more difficult to implement, doesn't mean that those initiatives aren't worth pursuing, whether in the short term or the long term. And so we're really looking for guidance here as to what potential amendments the commission would like to consider when it votes on amendments to the recertification regulation in the near future.
Thank you, Annie. I think in terms of the request that we commissioners provide some assistance to those who have put together this incredibly detailed set of information, and we commend you for having reached out to the extent that you have, Attorney Lee, in putting together this material. I think we might start, although I see our executive director's hands in the air, but we might start with our law enforcement commissioners, specifically Commissioner Crispin and Calderon, in terms of their views, if they're willing to express them. But let me start with our executive director, and then I'll turn to Commissioner Crispin and Commissioner Calderon.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to address or briefly talk about a memo that has also been included in the packet, that's authored by me, that puts into context perhaps a little bit this discussion as well. The current status for individuals that have a break in service fall under the regulations of the MPTC when it comes to physical standards and other things. If somebody has a break in service of 5 years or more, it could be an injury, it could be a administrative leave, or whatever the case may be. They are required to come back and do a full academy altogether. That also means a full psychological evaluation and an entry-level physical evaluation, just like any cadet. This could be a veteran officer that, for whatever reason, has a break in service. Once it hits 5 years, it's a de novo evaluation. When if it's between 3 and 5 years, there is certain guidance, certain requirements that the MPTC may evaluate. It's mostly a test that is a classroom type test. It's not a physical test that they have to pass, including having to be appraised of any kind of in-service training that they may have missed. And if it's less than 3 years, that break in service, they just have to catch up to the in-service training that they have missed. The point in me mentioning this is that there's a recognition that being out of service for 5 years or more requires this notion of a full-time academy altogether, but an evaluation of their physical fitness as well. But we currently have nothing for those individuals with 3 years or less, which is, as mentioned in the statute, as mentioned here before, a presumption that there needs to be this ongoing fitness of officers. There's a lot of literature, a lot of studies around the country around the need to address physical fitness. One that stays with me is that officers come into the profession being the fittest compared to the rest of the population physically, and leave the profession less fit than the rest of the population, on average. So there's clearly something that happens along the way that decreases the officer's physical fitness, and in my view is a real business case for considering what to do along the way. So again, that's been included in the packet, and we would be more than happy to answer any questions or react to commissioners' comments if it pleases them.
Thank you, Enrique. And if I could then just turn initially at least to Commissioners Crispin and Calderon. I'm sorry, Commissioner Bluestone, do you want to speak first?
I just had a question. I don't want to supersede my colleagues, though. I can certainly wait.
Commissioner Crispin, then, thank you, and we will get back to you, Commissioner Bluestone.
On my end, someone who worked in the academy for over 7 years, I've consistently been concerned about physical fitness standards. Like the Enrique mentioned earlier about the fitness level of most recruits coming out of the academy being its highest. And I do know there are some departments that offer incentives, but for me, the biggest concern is that on average, police officers are dying anywhere from 6 to 10 years sooner than the average person. And I think a lot of that has to do with the stress, but also the lack of physical fitness standards that we have. So I'm just trying to figure out at this point, I don't want to be in a position where we're forcing officers to work out, but also how do we offer incentives so that they understand this is an important piece of what they do, right? Because we talk about in policing, the first level of force is presence, right? And presence has a lot to do with fitness. I think having them think about long term outside of their careers. I think the ability to do the job also. I think the less fit you are, the less you are able to do the job. So those have always been my concerns. I hope that we find a way that we can encourage and provide incentives to police officers so that they can become fit, not just for the job, but for long-term durability into retirement.
Thank you. Commissioner Calderon?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in, Madam Chair. From the perspective of the unions that I'll speak for on this topic, we did bring this up in our law enforcement policy group meeting recently, and I know some of our representatives are also attending this meeting in the attendee section. So we have some support for the document that was handed out and that we're looking at. The nutritional educational information section, on-site fitness opportunities, off-site fitness opportunities. One more, excuse me. Even the evaluation section, when we had a conversation about evaluations, there was concern from rank and file officers and their representatives, but it boiled down to if there's going to be a wellness visit, that wellness visit should be by your own medical provider, your own physician. If it is done on an annual basis, I think that it would be more well received if we were doing it with our personal physicians. That way that information, that medical information is kept private, but yet is still mandatory to let our organization know that officers are healthy. So on this chart, there is some support to from offices and from the organizations. It's about how do we start to implement that? How do we get departments to buy into the idea that whether it's reimbursing payments that are for off-site clinics, gymnasiums, etc. How do we get the departments to buy into that? And if not, then how do we get departments to build their own gyms and allow workout time within the course of their duty? I know some agencies, here it says 150 plus agencies in Massachusetts already provide on-site fitness opportunities. I think that's great that they do it, because I know that, at least speaking in Boston, every firefighter house has a gym in it. They're allowed to work out. I'm comparing like professions in some manners, the extreme fitness that's needed to perform those duties. It would just make sense that police departments would have their own workout facility as well. We're not quite there yet. In Boston, well, we're about halfway there. There are some gyms, but unfortunately you have to pay for them. There's some locations you have to go on your own time, and it's difficult I'm speaking for my own offices here, it's difficult for our offices to make it into the gym when they're ordered to work doubles. They're 4 days in a row coming in. So not intending to give a shot there, but it's the reality of where we are. And we all know that policing is short-staffed around the Commonwealth. So if you have officers that are working 16.5-hour days, at some point they have to sleep. So that there's some concern about the requirements that we're looking to put in place, but I wanted to make sure that I say for the people I'm speaking for, there's also support out there. There is a grave concern amongst the union rank and file about the long-term health care, about the effects of being a police officer, whether it's eating, working out, or sleeping. So there is some support out there. I would ask my colleagues to make sure that they're weighing in with the commission, send letters directly to the executive director or any commissioner that you want to. If I'm not getting your message across in my presentation here, please weigh in so that we make sure that no stone is unturned. But there is some good support out there. It's just a matter of how do we get to the next level.
Thank you. And with that, I'll go back to you, Commissioner Bluestone.
Yeah, thanks. I think just in my kind of a review of the general literature around behavior change, it seems that education might be a necessary but not sufficient ingredient of actual change. And I'm wondering in this particular area with the programs or the departments that have used education, whether it's around nutrition or other aspects of health, if there's been any outcome measure that shows that any of the intended changes have actually occurred. And I think I'm probably addressing that question to you, Attorney Lee.
Thank you, Commissioner Bluestone. I don't have an answer for you on that specific piece right now, but I can look into it and get back to you.
Thank you.
And I think Commissioner Crispin may be able to respond in part. I think I've seen his hand in the air on this one. Please, Commissioner Crispin.
Yeah, I know Charlene had her hand up. I'll wait for her before I kind of weigh in.
Commissioner Luma.
Thank you. So one, thank you for just putting these materials together. What's striking to me is that there's such an emphasis on physical fitness when you first enter the academy and when you first get on the job. But I guess the question is, how do we maintain that? And from my perspective, I think it makes sense to have some physical fitness requirement, although I understand that may be burdensome for people who didn't have that expectation previously. So I'm talking about people who've been on the job for decades, right? And how that might be, how that may impact them. So I'm wondering if we would consider something where we would either augment the requirement to meet the needs of maybe people who've been on the force for some time, or grandfather them in, so that the requirement is not as strenuous, right? Instead of like a physical fitness, maybe it is the wellness check with your your physician yearly, and then those who maybe joined the force within the past decade or so, they would require that additional fitness, physical fitness test that's almost similar to what's required when you first get on a job or into the academy. But I think based on what's been presented to us, it absolutely makes sense to include some type of physical component in addition to what the other items that are on the chart. I just wonder, how do we support those and be reflective of those who've been on a job for years who may not be able to meet those standards currently.
Thank you. And I think Commissioner Crispin, do you want to respond at this point? And then we'll turn to our executive director.
Absolutely. So I know for the last 10 years at the Boston Police Academy, there's been substantial efforts made to educate police officers around nutrition and physical fitness, to the point where they're actually, at one point, we were teaching classes several times a week, twice a day. And I thought that was probably one of the better things that we did, because we had classes for people from anywhere from beginning to advanced, and it was a way to build camaraderie and also kind of instruct people. We can get a workout in 15 minutes, right? As opposed to people coming in and thinking, oh, I got to spend an hour in the gym. I think we had some gains, but again, I think we need some push by executive level directors at the police departments, managers, to make sure that they are allowing police officers and also incentivizing it, right? I know the education piece is huge, but I said above and beyond the education is providing opportunities for police officers to come in and get a workout during the course of their shift.
Thank you. Let me now turn to our executive director.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to react a little bit to the comments from Commissioner Bluestone. I don't know if this addresses necessarily the education part, But one of the things that that we know of other jurisdictions and other similar industries is these informational, but contextualized to the individual. If there was a way to inform officers about certain metrics in contrast and relation to their peers, there may be a motivation by those officers to really better their habits. If there was a way, let's say, to say, to people individually without sharing any kind of personal data, just everything anonymized, that you are at the 95 percentile compared to all other officers in Massachusetts, in whatever the metric is, BMI, whatever, versus 20 percentile. Non-punitive, that doesn't mean you're going to lose your certification. That's something else that we've heard quite loudly. It would, in theory, force the individual to contemplate their habits and some additional information and resources to contemplate and perhaps motivate that individual to make some positive changes. Again, this would have to be thought through. Again, there's legitimate concerns about sharing personal information, health information, but when it's tailored in that way compared to your peers, we know from other areas that has a shot at being effective.
Thank you. Commissioner Calderon.
Thanks again, Madam Chair. I'm getting some input from my peers, so I figured I'd chime back in. When it comes to the physical fitness standards and test, again, we're supporting the idea of health. And when I say we're, I'm talking about the unions across the Commonwealth. But we want to make sure that we put out publicly here that age and ability come into play. And I know that each of my fellow commissioners have addressed that, and of course we know it's a concern, but I've been asked to relay that police officers come on this job physically capable, physically fit, passing all of the standards, and are healthy when they enter this job. But 35, 40 years later, when you become older, after years on the job, after so many hours of work, after various injuries, you're not able to meet these standards. Even standards sometimes that are employed now under the Cooper test, as it's known. Those standards can't be achieved by a good majority of officers at an older age. It's not that they're obese, it's that they're suffering from injuries from being a police officer for 32 plus years. So maybe during this conversation, I know it's a matter of legislation when it comes to age and retirement, but that might be something that our commission wants to have conversations with certain legislators, is if we're looking for police officers above the age of 50 to look, feel, and act like they're 32 again, that's probably not a reality, and we need to do something about the measures. Maybe the standards in the Commonwealth should be back to what New York City used to be at 25 years as a police officer and 50 years of age, and we thank you for your service and you move on. I don't know what the correct answer is, but I've been given this task to make sure the information is shared, so I just want to let everybody know that it'll be a sensitive topic for police officers around the Commonwealth when we stop putting standards to age, because if I could, Eddie Crispin, Commissioner Crispin, my counterpart, Commissioner himself is in fantastic shape, and not everybody can do what he's doing physical fitness wise for various injuries and so forth on the job. So what works for one doesn't work for everybody is probably the way I should say that, but it's a concern.
Thank you. Commissioner Hall, please.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on what Commissioner Calderon was saying and want to know, Commissioner Calderon, what would be an alternative for that? Because this could be seen as ageist. I agree with you. And we need to think about, I have a gym right down the hall from my office. And I try to get there at 5 o'clock every morning. I made it 2 days this week, which is not bad, but we're all very different, right? And menopause, let's just talk about it. I mean, things happen to a body. In addition to that, another thing you touched on that I know personally about, I mean, if you pick up secondary, for instance, if you're working overtime, you're barely getting sleep. and we need to talk about rest being part of physical fitness. And so then you say, you know, to Commissioner Crispin's point, I think there's people who are just more disciplined, and maybe that is a way of life for them. And other people, you're just doing the job every day, and you may want to do that, but you're not able to get to that level. So I'm wondering, you know, if the union has talked about what are some alternatives to that. Would there be a different standard? Because we still want police to be able to, and maybe this is ableist even, I don't know, to be able to walk around. Maybe you have to be able to run, you know, there has to be some level that we're able to say, you are fit to serve, like the military. There are standards, you are fit to serve, whatever that means, but I'd be willing to entertain what are some other levels of fitness maybe that would keep, since we're, again, facing a shortage of police officers, not being able to recruit all across the board, nonprofits, et cetera, just thinking about how we're thinking about work, et cetera. So, you know, those thoughts, but also, do you have any suggestions yet? Or are you all working on some other ways of thinking about how we would be able to talk about fitness for folks who have been on the job? I know Commissioner Luna talked about maybe grandfathering or grandmothering people in.
Yeah, I can answer some of those, and my answers right at the top of my head will be for specifically the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, because that's who I represent. So without consulting my other counterparts throughout the state, I'll speak just strictly for my own. It's a great conversation to have openly, and we should, because the reality is, I'm 54. I can't do what I did when I was 32. I've gone down a flight of stairs. I've had various injuries. So you can't expect a police officer that has performed the job at a certain level to be able to do the same thing that maybe another 50-year-old police officer can do. So as we start talking about what physical fitness standard should we have, I think it needs to be a standard that's not made up by a non-police officer. And I say that respectfully, obviously the people on the commission with me. If a police officer at 50 years old can answer a radio call for service and stand on a post for 16 hours a day, or protect the citizenry when the tall ships come in here next year, then that's probably the physical fitness standard that we should be looking at. There's grave concern about the Cooper test. How effective is it? Is it necessary? Yeah, so I think when it comes to what standard we try to set, it needs to be a realistic standard. What is the expectation of a 30, 40, 50-year-old police officer? And if that standard can't be met after X amount of years on the job, then what do we do for that officer and the family if we're going to force them to leave the job? Is that a disability? Is that I don't want to call it ageism, but let's just say that I can't perform the job anymore, but I've given my 30 years instead of the 32 that's requirement. Are we going to award that officer the extra 2 years for pensionable service? So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. And again, if we were going to change the age and bring the age for retirement down, like I know New York used to once have, and the Massachusetts State Police used to once have here, that's a legislative matter. So a lot of thought into a particular physical fitness standard that we want to employ. I think that's a very lengthy and in-depth conversation, but one that should be had, and I don't mind having that openly, Commissioner. I appreciate the open conversation and the time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Talley?
Well, I just want to say I agree with my fellow commissioners Hall and Calderon, but maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't, but isn't there like a minimum criteria? Like if you're walking the beat, you should be able to do these things, regardless of whatever age you are, you should be able to do certain things. If you're not, is it possible to transition the person to like desk duty or something that doesn't require as much? Like there's different phases based on your physical ability. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you're able to do these things, you're able to continue doing this type service within the police force type thing.
Madam Chair, am I able to answer that? I think he's.
Yes, please.
again, you're right on target for what I was trying to express is, yes, and I use myself as an example. If I'm able to walk that beat and stand for 16 hours and serve the general public, that's me and my physical capabilities, but maybe another officer of the same age that is suffering from a rebuilt knee reconstruction or has a back injury, torn rotator cuff surgery, and they are able to come back to work at a certain capacity. Those are the things that we need to take into consideration, because if you could do the job on the street, that's probably the standard that we should try to employ. And when I know I mentioned the Cooper test, but there's been a lot of comments about dragging the ball and different testing that they do. The reality in policing is we're not dragging a ball. You know, it's probably a good standard for strength testing. I'm not going to pretend to know who employed that or who put that standard in, but firefighters have to drag a dummy body when they go through training, because they may have to throw a person over the shoulder, get them out of a fire, bring them down a ladder. For the most part, police officers aren't doing that. So I just want to make sure that I continue to try to reiterate that whatever standard that we do talk about setting, it needs to be a realistic standard that the police officer today is actually performing out on the street. And you're right, Commissioner Tully, that if we're able to stand out in the street and do that job, then that's the standard I think you're saying that we should go by, and everybody should be able to do that. If not, then maybe they should be inside, which brings me again back to my former conversation is the healthy police officer that came on the job at 25, if he or she developed an injury due to working as a police officer, and now at age 50, 52, they can't, then how do we make that officer and their family whole if we tell them you can't be a police officer anymore? So food for thought.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Commissioner Bluestone, I think you were next.
Yes, thanks. I think I'm hearing a little bit of reluctance to consider a standard, and I just want to make the point that you know, maybe we shouldn't be afraid of imposing a standard of some sort, even though it's difficult, as you point out, Commissioner Calderon, because what we do know is that obviously physical fitness is important for officers, line of duty officers who are out on the street. There may be differences in what's required for different types of jobs, and that is a complicated issue. But we also know that use of force increases as physical fitness decreases. So I do think, at least personally, I'm in favor of some sort of a standard, and it does sound like it will be difficult to arrive at what that should look like. But I also want to point out that, as we talked about last month, the job itself, in my view, creates significant health risks for officers. And so for that reason, since we know that the stress of the job so it contributes to these health outcomes and these mental health outcomes, I do feel that we have an obligation to make sure that officers have access to opportunities to be healthy, to have physical fitness be part of the work itself. And whether that's informational, like you're talking about, Commissioner Crispin, it sounds to me like the information may be one component of that, but what's also really important is that there's a culture change going on when you get people together and really talking about their health and what kinds of things they can do to take more control over their health. But I think that we also need to remember that behavioral and physical health are interwoven, and they're interdependent. So it's my view that we need to try to weave together initiatives that will address both behavioral and physical health within the job, and create incentives that are part of the job. And if you look at some of the some of the other initiatives that are going on in other states, things like changing the foods in vending machines and making sure people have access to information and having conversations and trying to change the culture within departments. It seems to me like it's a number of different things together that are going to get us to the goal.
Thank you. Enrique, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just from some of the discussion and a particular question actually that's on the chat, what we discussed in the past is the alternative and assumption that whether we put in place a standard or a directive or to the agency, let's say to offer incentives or etc., that they not be pass fail, that they don't be don't have the certification of an officer be in jeopardy if they are not met. I think one might argue whether that diminishes the effectiveness, but similar to the approach that we seem to be going with on behavioral health, the requirement over there is presumed to be that somebody attends. Whatever happens in a wellness check is between that individual, the peer support person, and the individual. Nothing to be shared with an agency like Post, etc. Simply having a requirement that makes an officer or incentivizes an officer to make healthier choices may be a good way to go, as opposed to a pass-fail test, like what Commissioner Calderon was talking about. Let me mention one last thing. From our research, the profession is moving away from Cooper test, as was mentioned. It really doesn't. It's not important to do a number of sit-ups or run a mile under certain minutes. What's important is to be able to perform the job tasks, the functions, whether it's going up a flight of stairs or 2 flights of stairs or whatever the case may be. A physical abilities test, which is deployed in Massachusetts for those coming in, is the way that they're going. So of course we would look to all those examples, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Crispin.
Yes, I think this is a hard balancing test, right? Because we want to make sure that we're not pushing officers out and when they don't get there. But I think my concern is when we see brand new officers who have graduated a year out of the academy gaining substantial amounts of weight, 50, 60 pounds in some instances. And people, I think at the end of the day, this is a physical job, right? Even though you may go weeks without engaging in some kind of physical confrontation, but you are running upstairs. You do have to place people under arrest, and sometimes people are not compliant. I think regardless of what your rank as a police officer, I like to say police officer is a police officer is a police officer. Should there be a parade, we should be able to put every single person who's a sworn officer on the line and expect that that person be able to do the jobs of a police officer. While it's hard to say these are the standards, there has to be standards or else we lose it. If there's no need for standards, we shouldn't have on the front end of entering the academy. And I think when you set standards, people know they have to meet those standards. They generally will find a way to meet those standards. Now, the question is, how do we get people there without them feeling like they're being pushed out? I think that's always been the question. I think if we tell people these are the standards you're going to have to meet, people will find a way. And I think departments can do a better job of giving officers time, incentivizing it, whatever it is, so that they can meet the standard that's expected of them and they can do the job. And I think the other piece is the more in shape police officers are, the less likely they are to get injured. And we know over the years, officer injury has been a major issue.
Thank you. I think we started this discussion because we were asked by Enrique and by Randy and by Annie whether the commissioners would please address these issues because it was important to hear their perspectives. I think they would agree that the commissioners have responded to that request in fulsome fashion. I think we've given a lot of material back to you to now work with and to provide to us as you formulate the standard that we will at some point address the specific things. So I think with that, mindful of the other matters we have to take up today, perhaps we can move on to the next item in the agenda unless there's anybody who, Commissioner Calderon, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I thought you were finishing if we had one more. I was just reading the question and answer as my phone continues to ding here. I've just been asked to make a point that if there's a standard that we do set as the commission continues to discuss this, that standard should be across the board and realistic. I think I've touched on that, but I wanted to make sure as I'm being asked to say it publicly. And there's also another question about what do we do again about those offices after X amount of years that cannot meet that standard? How do they and their family get compensated? So I want to make sure I stress those two pieces because that's what I keep getting. I appreciate it again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think with that, let me now move on to the next item on our agenda, the policy on information in the National Decertification Index. And with that, I'll turn to our legal counsel, Randall Ravitz, please.
Thank you again. At the Commissioners' May public meeting, we introduced and discussed a proposed policy on information in the National Decertification Index, or NDI, and there's a question raised about the procedure for making changes to information in the NDI. We've included some information about the NDI in the Commissioners' meeting packet to respond to that, and we're reintroducing the policy in the same form that it was introduced previously. As discussed last time, the Commission's governing statute and regulations provide for serious consequences for one who is listed in the NDI. They provide that the officer is then not eligible for admission to law enforcement training programs or appointment or employment in law enforcement or certification as a law enforcement officer by the Commission. Yet, as the information that we provided explains, and despite the name National Decertification Index, the system actually allows jurisdictions to upload information not only concerning decertifications, but also concerning lesser actions, such as when someone is suspended or placed on probation or voluntarily relinquishes a certification or is denied certification or is their case is under review or investigation. So this policy would state that the Commission interprets those statutory and regulatory provisions that I referred to apply only to revocations of certification, in which case the Commission would be required to decertify the officer anyway, or other actions that are substantially equivalent to a decertification by the Commission and that are listed in the NDI. But information in the NDI can still be taken into account in other ways. So even other types of information can be considered by the Commission in other ways. It just wouldn't be treated automatically as constituting a decertification. And also, Massachusetts law enforcement agencies would still be required to report all NDI information that they're aware of to the Commission, regardless of its nature. And those other than the executive director or that person's designee would be asked to refrain from entering or changing information in the NDI that relates to any Massachusetts action or Massachusetts officer, and to bring to the executive director's attention any Massachusetts-related information that should or should not be included in the NDI. And all of that is consistent with how the NDI is intended to function. In fact, in answer to the question that was raised at the May meeting, information in the NDI can only be entered and changed by the certifying agency for the jurisdiction where that took the action. So with all that, we are now asking for the Commission to vote to approve the policy, but I can answer any questions if the chair would like me to do so.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have any question about the policy that we are being asked to vote on? I don't think I see any hands in the air. Then is there a motion to approve that policy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Mr. Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Crispin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kajrosian,
Yes.
Mr. Luma,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes, so that's unanimously carried.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, there are no matters not anticipated by the chair at the time of posting, and therefore I would at this time entertain a motion to move into executive session with regard to to address matters pertaining to General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, or an individual under the same statute, Section 21A5, to discuss the investigation of charges of criminal misconduct under the same statute, Section 21A7, combined with General Laws, Chapter 6E, Section 8C2, and to the extent they may be applicable, General Laws, Chapter 6, Sections 168 and 178, to discuss the initiation of preliminary inquiries and initial staff review related to the same and regarding certain criminal offender record information, and under the same statute, Section 21A7, combined with Chapter 38 of the General Laws, Section 22F and G, to discuss and approve the minutes of a prior executive session. We will be addressing 5 reports of preliminary inquiry, 5 standards requests for approval to conduct preliminary inquiries, and an update on a single preliminary inquiry matter. And with that, is there such a motion to move into executive session?
So
Motion to,
moved.
Oh.
Is there a second?
second,
Thank you, Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Mr. Calderon,
Yes.
Mr. Crispin,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Kazarosian,
Yes.
Mr. Luma,
Yes.
Mr. Tally.
yes.
I'm also yes, so that's unanimously carried. Members of the public, we will not be reconvening in the public meeting after the executive session. We thank you for your participation in this meeting. Enrique, do you want to again remind members of the public if they have any additional comments or questions, how they can submit that to post?
Yes, thank you. Just by going to our website, mapostcommission.gov, or sending us an email at oc-comments@mass.gov.
Thank you. Let me also thank the staff who have worked on the matters that have been addressed today. We are very grateful for their very thorough and exemplary work, which helps us address the issues that we have to address. And I think with that, Jamie, do you want to just remind the commissioners, you have resent the information, is that it?
Yes, I resent. It should be right in the top of your email inbox.
Thank you. And I think with that, we'll take a 5-minute recess, and we will, at that point, go into executive session. Thank you, everybody.